What if Superman's powers shifted? This is the story of Superman Blue. Number 1. Superman's new powers. We open on the chaotic, bustling streets of an alien city. A high-speed flying car chase is broken out above the heads of the protesters chanting, "Break the council, break the council." On the other side, law enforcement try to silence the demonstration, warning the people marching to return to their homes. At the wheel of a flying hovercraft, one of the rebel figureheads, a large blue man with curled horns sprouting from his forehead, barks at his passengers to keep quiet as he ducks and dives to outmaneuver the police cars that chase after him. This is Ceritak, firstborn son of the head of the council that oversees this strange extraterrestrial town. At this moment, his own father gives the order to prepare the city's cannons and shoot his son out of the sky. Deadly force, however, proves unnecessary, as despite Ceritak's fancy flying, he's quickly cornered and forced to land. Ceritak's father quickly approaches, the blue face flushed red with anger as he yells down at his son,
"You have dishonored me for the last time, Ceritak. You were to succeed me on the council once I passed, boy. For your rebellious ways, I must remove that honor forever."
Ceritak only grunts his response as he once again sits behind the wheel of his vehicle. "Thanks. Best gift you ever gave me, old man." Charging up the engine, Ceritak once again speeds off into the city. "You honestly think I'd ever want to be in charge of this dump when all I want is out?" He yells behind him, not even looking at his father as he flees the scene. This is the city of Kandor, and its story has only just begun. Meanwhile, back on Earth, we find two familiar lovebirds going about their morning routine. For newlyweds Clark Kent and Lois Lane, this is just another beautiful morning in Metropolis. Laughing, joking, and a fair amount of smooching echo through the halls of their apartment as the couple prepares for the day ahead, until something completely unexpected happens. When Clark reaches for the toaster to retrieve breakfast, the mere approach of his hand causes the appliance to erupt in a miniature electronic discharge. The smoking remains of the toaster only occupy Clark's thoughts for a moment, though when the doorbell rings, the door. "Who could be here this early?" Clark wonders aloud to Lois. "Don't forget your glasses," Lois replies, wary of keeping her lover's secret identity a secret. Their early morning visitor turns out to be fellow reporter Dirk Armstrong, wondering how he can get back on good terms with both Clark and Lois's employer, the Daily Planet. But in the middle of their conversation, Clark reaches for the coffee pot again, only to find that his hand goes right through the machine. Just as the morning couldn't get any stranger, something familiar shakes Clark from his confusion once more. A siren outside calls the middle-mannered reporter into action as Lois shuffles their unexpected guest out the door. Sirens on the streets of Metropolis can only mean one thing. Somewhere, there's a job for Superman. While busting up the score of a couple common bank robbers, rather than block their bullets with his chest, Superman finds that the metal round suddenly phased through him just as the coffee maker had done. But this time, lives are on the line. Behind him, a man is struck with the crossfire, turning the routine crime bust into a life-or-death scenario. Superman melts the gun with his heat vision and quickly takes off with a wounded bystander to the nearest hospital. Growing more and more concerned about the sudden changes his Kryptonian biology seems to be going through, Clark takes Lois on a quick trip north to his Fortress of Solitude. There, Clark gets more than he bargained for. On a nearby pedestal, Lois notices a bottle containing what looks to be a miniature city. "Is that Kandor?" Lois asks. "Yes," Clark replies. "It's populated by tens of thousands of people who are imprisoned there by Tolos. The unrestful home of Kandor is not just any city. It serves as a prison containment unit for Tolos, an ancient entity capable of possessing anyone it pleases and bending them to their will." Suddenly, though, Clark's entire body begins to vanish from sight as his proximity to Kandor seems to draw him into the bottled city. Inside Kandor, at the edge of town, Ceritak watches the containment field wistfully as a figure begins to appear in the mist. Seeing Superman partially phasing into view, Ceritak makes a rash decision and dives at the figure as Clark attempts to escape the strange force pulling him to Kandor. "You're taking me with you!" Ceritak bellows as he jumps after the man he sees escaping. When Clark materializes back on Earth, Ceritak is nowhere to be seen. But Superman knows something very concerning has just happened, and he speeds off with Lois back to Metropolis, determined to get some answers. But as he flies away, the ice cracks beneath him as an unintended stowaway in the form of Ceritak bursts up from the tundra yelling, "At last! Free!" Back in his home city, Superman's problems go from bad to worse as the changes to his powers start rapidly ballooning out of control. After approaching renowned scientist Emil Hamilton to run some tests on him, Clark's life seems to have gone back to normal. But when Lois looks over at her husband one night, she finds that his baby blue eyes are crackling with latent energy. So much so that Superman warns her to stay back to avoid hurting her. Falling back and clutching his head, Clark becomes lightheaded and begins falling back, phasing right through the wall of their apartment. Dropping like a stone to the streets below, Soup's energized body only grows more charged when he touches the cool concrete of the street below. Horrified onlookers gaze at their champion in fear for the first time. Even though Superman assures them everything's under control, they can tell that the Man of Steel is clearly in distress. Diving and dodging through the city streets, making sure not to come into contact with any motorized vehicles lest they react the same way his toaster did, Clark makes his way towards Professor Hamilton, praying he can make it there in time. Alas, even Superman isn't perfect, and one latent bump against the power lines caused the entire city grid to completely collapse. Hiding in the subway tunnels, Superman finally finds the privacy he needs to focus and get his new abilities under control. He becomes solid once again and no longer leaks such strange electronic energy, but the damage has been done. Out on Metropolis's nearby island prison, the power outage created the perfect opportunity for the superpowered inmate the Atomic Skull to break free of his bonds. As delusional as he is dangerous, the Atomic Skull takes off in hopes of finding his Zelda, an imagined love interest who happens to look an awful lot like Lois Lane. After finding Lois, Skull quickly becomes obsessed, seeing Lois as his own long-lost lover. But rising from the sewers comes a crackling Superman who demands the Skull unhand his loving wife. Their battle rages valiantly, but the Man of Steel is at a clear disadvantage this time, given that all of a sudden, Superman seems to be working with a completely different set of powers than he's used to. After taking such a hit that his being is suddenly dissipated all across space like an electronic pulse, Superman quite literally pulls himself together at a scientific hub in the Arctic, whose instruments happen to be tuned just right to focus whatever energy had become entangled with to allow him to rematerialize. Having lost precious time, Superman speeds back to Metropolis, where Lois has been keeping the Atomic Skull busy by playing into his romantic delusions. Thinking quickly, Lois convinces the Skull to move her from the city center, keeping the danger away from any innocent bystanders. When Superman finally finds Lois holed up and captured by the Skull, he renews his attack with desperation. But both are quickly distracted when a nearby chemical reaction of harmful pollutants threaten to blow a hole right where Metropolis stands. Superman manages to save the day by siphoning all the potential radioactive energy off the crates into his own body. This neutralizes the threat of the nuclear holocaust, but leaves the Man of Steel weak and more vulnerable than he'd been in years. But before the Skull could take advantage of his opponent's state, Lois runs up to the villain with arms wide, once again casting herself as the madman's lost lover, Zelda. Getting within range without a hitch, Lois immediately attaches an inhibitor device to the Atomic Skull's metal armor, one that saps the villain's dangerous energy source and negates all of the Skull's considerable powers. With both threats neutralized, Lois and Superman would normally embrace, but Clark warns her to keep her distance. "You'd best keep back, Lois. I may still pose a threat to humans." Supes continues, his body still crackling with a strange but powerful electrical hue. "I don't know what I am. I don't know a lot of things. All I do know is that in real life, stories don't always have happy endings." Number 2. Superman Blue vs. Ceritak. With the immediate threat of the Atomic Skull taken care of, Superman now had some extra time to look into where exactly the changes in his physiology were coming from. Days after the battle between Superman and the Skull, Clark and Lois were still learning how to navigate domestic life with Clark's newfound electronic abilities. Alongside his new magnetic powers, Clark had developed another extremely worrying side effect. He was human. Or more accurately, while maintaining his solid body, Clark had lost the durability and super strength that he had enjoyed up until this point. Superman could now stub his toe, cut himself shaving, and be harmed by anything and everything coming his way as long as he kept his newfound shock powers under wraps. Lois had called to let him know that some sort of monster was attacking downtown Metropolis. Only a fizzing spark was left when Superman zapped into action, reaching the crime scene in a matter of moments and being met by none other than Ceritak, the horned rebellious heir to the throne of Kandor. Upon seeing the S symbol on Superman's chest, Ceritak also recognized the man standing before him. That being wearing it looks different, but a guy don't forget an aura like that. Ceritak thought as he and Superman stared each other down, neither speaking the other's language. How do I prove I don't want trouble? Ceritak thought as he slowly extended his arm in a show of peace. Got it? Look, I'm reaching out, see? No weapon. But as soon as his arm came close to touching Soup's, the discharge that erupted out of the Man of Steel's body was enough to send Ceritak flying back. With that, a battle between the two broke out in earnest. Though neither combatant was looking for a fight, the sudden and uncontrolled nature of Superman's new abilities ended any possibility of a peaceful resolution between them. In minutes, the fight between Ceritak and Superman had spanned the length of the city. Usually, Superman is in tight control of his abilities, making sure to prevent collateral damage where he can and protect all innocent bystanders from harm. But now, with his far more abstract energy-based powers in play, it was hard for him to keep this fight in check. Not only was Ceritak less concerned for those who might be hurt in the crossfire, but Superman himself was giving off explosive blasts of electricity. These threatened to destroy bridges, fry nearby generators, and even possibly start fires. But during this fight, Superman deployed two new abilities connected to his Sparky situation. One was to create an energy field powerful and dense enough to slam Ceritak like a giant fist out of the sky, and the other was to travel even faster than usual by dispersing his own molecules through the air and rematerializing across town in an instant. At one point, Superman even utilized his control over magnetic fields to toss a taxicab at Ceritak, mirroring how he might have fought if he still had his super strength available to him. It seemed for a moment as though Superman might be finally gaining control of his newfound powers, but this hope would die as quickly as it started. When Ceritak eventually managed to get a hold of Superman, he tossed him viciously into a nearby billboard. The feedback discharge that resulted from Superman's energy form coming into contact with an electric source of that magnitude was staggering. For the second time since Soups gained his shocking new abilities, he inadvertently caused a citywide blackout of Metropolis. In an instant, the entire metropolitan region became a cacophony of sputtering, crackling sparks and detonations, and then, suddenly, all was quiet. When order returned to the streets of Metropolis, one of the only lights shining out into the night was Superman himself, shimmering and glistening as cascades of light crackled out from his very skin. "No! Stay back!" Superman begged the populace as the citizens of Metropolis gathered to see their beloved hero in such pain. Jimmy Olsen, one of Clark Kent's oldest friends, was one of them, commenting, "Superman looks like he's seeping out of existence or something." Jimmy's guess may have been closer than he knew, but Superman himself could see nothing. Only senseless colors and shapes moved across his field of vision with no rhyme or reason. When Clark finally regained his senses, his eyes focused only to see the raised fist of Ceritak once more winding up for a tremendous blow. As the blue-horned Kandorian's fist fell with unimaginable force across Superman's chin, once more Superman was hurled through the air and across the city. Knowing that he wouldn't be able to take much more punishment if he continued to engage with Ceritak, Superman focused all his might into one final blow. Finally, he had cracked one vital mystery of his new powers. In order to use them effectively, Clark had to truly focus harder than he had ever needed to before. But when he saw Ceritak turn and begin barreling down on Jimmy Olsen, it gave Superman all the incentive he needed to find his strength. In that moment, Superman moved faster than he ever had before, carrying perhaps more potential energy than any one being ever had before him. In one electrifying uppercut, Superman sent Ceritak careening out over the skyscrapers and into the Metropolis harbor, putting the finishing touch on their first but not last battle. Left without any more enemies to battle, Superman found himself close to fading away entirely. "I'll find the creature again," he promised, "after I get help." From there, Superman made his ghostly way to the laboratory of Professor Emil Hamilton, causing a massive power surge with his mere presence. When he materialized within the lab, Lois couldn't help but cry out, "Superman, your skin, it's turned blue! How?" But Superman was clearly in more distress than Lois knew, for he cut her off in desperation.
"Please, it's all I can do to hold myself together. Can't do it much longer."
Professor Hamilton jumped into action as he led Lois away from where the crackling, volatile form of Superman stood.
"We have a containment chamber prepared for you, Superman!"
the doctor yelled over the noise.
"Right through that door!"
Stepping right through the door as if it wasn't there, the incorporeal Superman squeezed his eyes in focus and pain as he held his body together, praying that his wife and his friends could do something, anything, to help him. But the scanners inside the lab didn't have a sunny prognosis as Professor raced to finish his calculations. Sensors indicate Kal-El's condition is critical and eroding. Analysis confirms that he will ceased to exist within the hour. From the viewing platform, Lois couldn't help but peek in through the window, watching her husband writhe in pain as he struggled to maintain consciousness. A few days ago, he could hear a pin drop in Brazil. Now he can't hear me. He's using every bit of concentration he has, fighting to stay alive. Eventually, as Professor Hamilton and his staff raced to save Superman's life, an envoy of LexCorp arrived, offering a Hail Mary solution. A new advanced polymer was delivered to the professor with the promise that its unique properties might be able to help Superman. Though initially hesitant to accept any sort of help from the likes of Lex Luthor, eventually it was Lois's own push that convinced the rest to take Lex at his word and use the fabric to save Superman. Meanwhile, Ceritak finally regained consciousness, having floated through the harbor and boarded a fishing vessel hoping for some shelter. Upon seeing his monstrous visage, the elderly sailor captaining the vessel fell, clutching his chest as a heart attack gripped him. Ceritak, though a monster on the outside, never wished death or suffering on anyone in this world or any other and quickly rushed the man to the nearest hospital. "This man needs your care," he bellowed in a language unknown to anyone on Earth. "Save him!" Though they were themselves terrified to see the monster that had fought Superman moments ago, the doctors and nurses took the fisherman from Ceritak's claws and rushed to save his life. No sooner had they taken the man that Ceritak dashed off into the alleyways, knowing how terrifying he appeared to the people of this strange world. As Ceritak hid amongst the hustle and bustle of Metropolis, back at Hamilton's lab, a suit had been prepared that could possibly represent a cure for what ailed the dying Kryptonian. After wheeling it into the chamber that held the last vestiges of Superman's consciousness, the light suddenly dimmed and a single blue light shot out of the top of the building. Superman was back, and he was better and bluer than ever. Well, dear viewers, that brings us to the end of this video. For more exciting Superman content, be sure to check out our other video where we cover the time he fought Batman's butler, Alfred.